All right. Well, hello, everybody. Hello again. This is Rich Eisen, and you are at the open mic where uh, I so often talk to great writers, editors, agents, folks from the publishing world and who write words for a living. I'm very thrilled today to be joined by one of the most successful mystery and thriller writers in the world, a three-time Edgar Award winner. That's which is, if you know anything at all about the mystery world, that's like winning multiple Oscars if you were an actor. So, and really a really nice guy too. T. Jeff Parker, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I can't complain about a thing in the world, you know. So I'm like I say, I'm sitting here on a Wednesday afternoon talking about books with you. So I couldn't get any better than that.
Okay.
Um, let's get into it because I wanted to talk about your most current book, which came out last year. It's called Then She Vanished, and it is set against the backdrop of the nation's very intense political divisions and even an insurrection. I'm not sure Nostradamus could have come up with a more predictive uh, setting in a novel than that one. I'll ask you some more questions about that in a minute. But tell me a little bit about the novel because I know it's going to come out in paperback this summer. So for those who may not be familiar, give us a little bit of a background on the book.
Yeah, it's a it's modeled to be kind of a classic PI tale. My hero is a San Diego area uh, private investigator, and in typical genre fashion, he's sitting in his office, late one day, and in walks his local California Assembly representative, whom he barely knows. The two men served together in war, uh, concomitantly, not really together. And this politician proceeds to hire Roland to find the politician's wife, who was run away 2 days ago, vanished. No sign of her. Friends don't know where she is. No credit card activity. She won't. Phone won't work. She vanishes, and Roland takes on the job of finding his old war acquaintance's missing wife, and that's the basic setup for the book.
Well, I'm curious. You know, as I mentioned, there was an insurrection that's part of all of the political intrigue that happens in the book, and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But I'm curious, of course, what kind of reaction did you have when you saw everything that happened at the Capitol in D.C. in January? Like I say, I'm not sure you could have written a more predictive story, and clearly you weren't trying to predict things. But what did you have an emotional reaction when you saw everything that happened there in January?
Yeah, I felt completely gut punched, Richard. I just watched TV for 48 straight hours. It seems like watching the videos over and over again, and all the speculation and footage and stuff. Yeah, I felt just emotionally wrecked. Um, to it kind of is predictive. The book that I wrote, the last book, Then She Vanished, does deal with an organized cadre of insurrectionists, if you will. I don't know. I don't think that word is used in the book, but they are seeding. They're seeding violence nationwide, statewide especially. So when I saw it kind of playing out in real life terms on television, the Capitol, I felt I felt an eerie sense of prognostication. Even though at the time, when I started writing that book, a full year 2 years ago, say a year and a half ago anyway. I mean, it takes forever for a book to get published. When I started writing it, and I, like you and a lot of other people in the world, felt a keen sense of the nation's divide. It was hot and getting hotter, way back a year and a half ago, if not before that. I tried to pattern my villains on people and groups who represent the grievances of our time, race bias and superiority and supremacy and all that stuff. And so I cobbled together this group who called themselves the Chaos Committee, and the Chaos Committee unleashes hell on the state of California.
Well, it's not. You mentioned Roland Ford. You know, you don't shy away from somewhat political themes in in your books. Not every book, of course, but it's not the first time Roland has encountered, folks who have run maybe from big religion or politics or what have you. And I know a lot of writers avoid uh, touching those topics either in their books or out in the world, in their personal world, maybe in public, in publicizing their stuff. Are you ever concerned that including social or political hot button issues in your work might hurt some of your readership, or might dissuade somebody from picking up one of your books?
I'm sure that it can and does. Absolutely. You can't in our America, even reading thoughtful, literate America, we have sharp divisions, So, for example, if you were to let it be known in your fiction that you thought that, Donald Trump was a terrible president, you would automatically lose 50% of your potential readers. And if you did the opposite, if you said that you thought that Donald Trump was one of the greatest leaders of all time, you would lose the other 50%. So yeah, that's true. For me, the reason I write about politics is I feel strongly about our country and the way people behave, and I think that what happens politically and in the zeitgeist, the papers, if you will, the headlines, I think that's kind of our daily bread. And when I write, I try to write things that 50 years from now, if I'm lucky enough to have a reader out there who picks up one of these books, I want him or her to know really as well as I can say it, exactly what it was like to be living in San Diego in 2020 and having the COVID crisis hit, if that's what I choose to write about. So I think that what's going on in the world, this politics that you mentioned, and the drifts of conscience that we all have are really kind of living history. And I think that we fiction writers must address these things. I think not to is to kind of miss the point, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, and you have a new book that's going to be coming out, I think, is it this year or next year?
My next book is going to come out next year, January.
Well, tell us, well, I'm not sure how much you can tell us, but whatever you can, tell us a little bit about it.
I will, I'm happy to. Now that I've said that we need to write about politics and the here and now so that we go on record accurately, my new novel, conceived during just a little over a year ago. I wrote the first page of that novel in March. I got it written down, March 10th, I think it was, 2020. Big COVID hit, the pandemic. And just before that started happening, like in January, when I was thinking of a new book to write, I decided that what I really wanted to do was not write another Roland Ford story, not even write a story that's set here and now. What I want to do is I want to write a coming of age thriller. It's about a 16-year-old boy searching for his 18-year-old sister who's left home in 1968 Laguna Beach, which draws this young 16-year-old protagonist into the psychedelic underground of Laguna Beach in 1968. So that's what my new book is about. It's called 1,000 Steps.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really different. And it was my way of ditching COVID, even though COVID hadn't, it wasn't quite yet. I mean, I was thinking about this, and by the time I actually wrote the first sentence of that 1968 book, COVID was around us. So I drew whatever you call it, it's a mulligan maybe. I didn't have to deal with COVID right now,
Well, it's interesting that you chose 1968, and I don't know how conscious that was, but 1968, if you think about the parallels between the chaos and social political turmoil of 2020, and think about the only year I can think of in recent history that was really comparable might be 1968.
I agree.
That year on purpose, or was there some other reason?
Well, very much on purpose. I mean, for the exact reasons that you said. I mean, the assassinations, the war in Vietnam, the protests, the division. It was hot. It was hot. The drugs, the sex, the rock and roll. I mean, there's a lot going on in 1968. And the beauty of 1968 to me as an author here in current day is that I witnessed that world. as a 14-year-old, I was 14 years old when I was standing on the corner of Coast Highway and Forest Avenue in Laguna Beach, looking at all these weird people doing weird things. And I experienced that time with the naivete of a 14-year-old. But 14-year-olds have good minds, and they're always seeing and they're always thinking, and they're not suckers. They see a lot, they experience a lot that they can't process it yet because they don't have enough history of their own. They haven't been around long enough to know that this is new, or this is repeating maybe. But just as a stunned onlooker and observer of that crazy time in a really kind of a crazy place, I feel blessed to have been there. I grew up right over the hill from Laguna and Tustin, so it was easy for me to get there. We hitchhike over, we have our friends' moms take us over, whatever, when we were 14, and just kind of be with the hippies and the stoners and experience life. It was a great time.
Well, it's also a very particular time. I mean, the language, the music, we don't think of that very much. I mean, we know if you're going to write something in Elizabethan times, or even in the Old West, where the language and even the cadence of everything was all very different. But Southern California beach culture in the late 60s had a vibe and a thing that was all of its own. Do you find yourself remembering it and being able to draw some exclusively from your own memories? Or are you finding, oh, now I got to go back and actually research this, make sure I'm remembering it correctly?
Almost everything in 1,000 Steps comes from my memory. I had to do, some research. I can't remember now, for example, I didn't remember how much a gallon of gas was in 1968, in the summer of 68 in Southern California, 34 cents, by the way. And stuff like that I needed to research. But really, I mean, it was a book tugged out of my own observations and my own experience. Yeah.
That's great. Well, it probably was cathartic in a way, was it?
Really was. It really was. As the pandemic gripped harder and harder like a gigantic python, starting really in March of last year, that threw me as a home-based author into my studio and into the story powerfully. I 1,000 Steps became my life and my antidote to the world, to reading the headlines and seeing what was going on, like in New York at that time and stuff, the bodies piling up.
Right.
Oh my God, so I not only felt, and I think a lot of us too, whatever you do for a living, whether you're a mechanic or an accountant or a writer or a reporter, or, when something like this happens, a lot of us feel really, really obligated to act. You feel like you need to do something. And what can I do as a novel writer, a fiction, mystery writer? What can I do to help with COVID? Well, actually nothing. All I can do is go do my job. And so that's what I did. And so that book, I think, because it was so different and such a slice of the past for me, and because it was so unlike anything I've ever done. As a writer, that story just absolutely demanded my attention, and it wrote itself. I mean, I would write twice as many pages a day of that book than I would write of an average book. My goal when I write, just on Monday through Friday basis, is I always try to get 5 pages a day. That's my goal, double spaced pages. Well, I was getting 10, 15 pages a day on 1,000 Steps because I felt so consumed by that story and so chased by COVID somehow. It's like I'm trying to get away from something,
Wow. Well, I wonder, for somebody like yourself that has built this long history in the thriller and mystery crime fiction genre, and when you want to do something that's a slight difference even from what you're maybe the most known for, how is that received? And because I know so often now, maybe with a younger writer who didn't have the track record, there might I've been told by some of those people that they get resistance to wanting to step outside of what maybe the industry feels they can market and make money off of. How is it for you? Or do you feel like you have the leeway to broaden yourself to whatever degree you want to?
No, I don't have much leeway at all. The publishers want Jeff Parker thrillers, and A Thousand Steps is a thriller, but it's a departure. It's a much different kind of thriller. And the way that what I had to do to get that, to find a publisher for that book was to leave my old publisher and send an outline of that book out to dozens of publishers in New York, and that's what I did. That's what my agent did, and we got offers, and we got some pretty good ones. We took the best with the best house that stepped up. So that's how I did it. Publishers are ferociously afraid of letting their authors go outside their genre or their gate, whatever their lane. Whatever that might be. If you're having some reasonable degree of success in A, then they're going to make you do A until you fall out of your chair.
Yeah, see, I often wonder about that because I do think, I've talked with a lot of writers over the years about how the industry has changed. And, a lot of those changes are good and, a lot of them are not. And one of the maybe less good ones is that, as the big houses winnow down and as the emphasis becomes so much more on profitability, there's not as much interest, of course, in taking a chance on a new writer. And even that has filtered over to things like you're talking about, where they don't even want to take a chance on somebody with an established track record over decades the way you do. That's really an interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of fascinating. I think in spite of the the vagaries, the ups and downs of publishing over the decades and stuff, it always seems to be changing, sometimes pointedly, kind of rapidly, and other times more slowly, but it always seems year after year after decade, just with such good fiction is being written. There's so many good books out there, and from the old veterans are hanging in there, and the new youngsters, the young adults in their 20s and early 30s are just shredding it. So whatever American publishing is doing wrong or right, they're still managing to get some good fiction out there.
Well, you mentioned earlier Roland Ford, and that's one of my very favorite characters of yours. And I've seen where that character has been compared to the Travis McGee character created by John D. MacDonald, who of course is one of the titans of the crime fiction genre. That's really high praise. And I think in great part, they're both classic tough guys in a way, but I think the thing that makes them stand out so much, at least for somebody like me, a reader like me, is that they also have tremendous compassion and empathy. They're not cookie cutter in any way. They don't win every fight. They don't always get the girl. They're flawed, but they're still the kinds of characters that have this really broad appeal. And it's easy to say, but I think it's really hard to do and accomplish as a writer in developing that character. If you don't mind, indulge me a bit. Tell me a bit how you developed Roland Ford and how you have evolved him over the 4 novels in which he's been the protagonist.
Yeah, happy to. I spent a long time thinking about Roland Ford before I even gave him a name. I knew that I wanted to write a series of PI books. I always liked PI books and TV shows. I like private investigators. I like the way they're free agents. They're not part of a bureaucracy. And I always wanted to write one. And so I decided to do that. And I found a publisher who was enthused about the idea. And I spent a lot after that, knowing that I was going to write next, I spent a long time creating Roland. I called him Roland just because I like the name Roland, the first name, the knight of Charlemagne's, Charlemagne's table, and I like the name and it's unusual. Ford is my father's, middle name, my son's middle name. We have Fords littered throughout the Parker clan and this side of the Parker clan, and I drive a Ford Explorer, so it was just a no-brainer that I name him Roland Ford. But no, in all seriousness, I thought about him a lot, and I always try to create my heroes to be believable heroes who not men of steel, like you said, and contain the qualities that I think are important in today's world, such as honesty, maybe compassion. being willing to look outside yourself, you know, observant. At the same time, nobody's fool. So I just spent a lot of time about Roland, and I thought that it would be almost remiss not to give him, in our day and age in this country, a military history. I mean, that's the history of our country since 9/11. It is, you know, or a recent history, and all young men, quote unquote, you know, within a certain age range have been there. You know, our armed forces have been all over the world, and these people contain our stories. They're America. And so I made Roland. Roland played a pretty. He was in Fallujah, you know, during the fighting off of the insurgents, and has combat experience there, and that ties into the new book. Because the guy he fought with was in Fallujah also. But I thought military experience would be representative, and I always want to do a physically capable guy, unless I'm purposefully trying not to. I wanted to be physically capable, have good portfolio. A PI, it seems to me, should be you know, fit, sober, decent with weapons, you know, decent with hand to hand, tough guy. This is fictional PI, not the real PIs, you know. And so he should have those things. And I also thought that psychologically, Roland should have enough. He should have enough history and enough secrets for me to reveal and tell over the course of, you know, X books, because I wrote a series and wanted to write a series. So I gave Roland, you know, the centerpiece bit of his psychology is that he lost his young, wonderful first and only wife very recently, before the beginning of the first book opens. They're both in their 30s. And she dies tragically in a plane accident. She's the pilot. And that loss informs Roland's spirit from A to Z. That's the bone that he chews on every day. And one of the things that I think I did well was that I because of that loss, and knowing that he would never find her again, he's pretty adept at finding people. He when somebody's missing, he gets it. He knows what it's like to miss someone. He knows what it's like to when something vanishes, because it's happened to him in the final way that no one will ever, you know, come up with her because she's dead. But when someone comes to Roland and says, you know, my little sister, you know, ran off 3 days ago with a nasty, bad boyfriend, and I want to, the cops aren't working fast enough, and I want you to find her. Roland feels that loss. And so I try to build his loss, his personal loss, into a sort of a professional creed, if you will, you know, and I think that works. It gives him a real reason for doing what he's doing, just besides, you know, making a little money.
It absolutely works. He's a fascinating character. He's also not your only character that you've written as a series. When you sat down and started thinking about Charlie Hood or Marcy Rayborn, were those also always intended to be series, or did they develop like that organically?
You know, both the Charlie Hood character that spans 6 books, and I wrote that first book to become a series. And the Mercy Rayborn was different. That was only a little kind of a 3-book series, interrupted by another book. And I never conceived that being anything more than 2 or 3 books. So, you know, I've done both ways. Sometimes the publishers will, you know, go, well, let's think longer term, and sometimes they'll just say, let's go one at a time and see where we land, and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of follow, you know, guidance there, but you know, I like writing standalone novels a lot too. I mean, half of my 26 books are standalone novels, and the other half are part of a series of one or another, you know. So I've written both ways, and I like both ways. There's something particularly delicious, though, about beginning what you know is going to be a really, if you can pull it off, it's going to be a really good standalone novel. There's nothing more exciting for a novelist than that, you know. I mean, the 6th book in a successful series, sure, that's fun too. But you know, a one-off is scary. You know, it's the old, you know, Hemingway and the blank page kind of thing. It's like, here we go. I don't have a series character. I don't have a setting. I don't have anything. All I have is a blank piece of paper, and I've got to entertain you.
Are you a plot, or not a plot? Of course, you're a plotter. Are you someone who does outlining, Or do you have the germ of the idea, maybe even the ending, and not know what's in the middle, and you sit down and write? How do you formulate those stories, whether it's a series or a standalone?
Well, I outline them and synopsize them, if you will, to myself and my editor as best I can. Editors almost always want to know, even if it's just a page or two, what you're going to do. And I don't blame them. And so I do that. And often I can't do it in a page or two. To me, it's more like usually an outline or proposals, 30 or 40 pages. And I will grind that story out to the best of my ability and see how it hits the publisher, and if they like it, then I'll begin the long and kind of arduous process of finding a way to write the first sentence, because a proposal doesn't have any first sentence in it. So that's kind of how I work. And then once that proposal is kind of done and good enough, and I can finally learn enough about the characters and the story to begin, that usually takes me 2 or 3 months. It's a long time between finally getting a story on paper and outline and beginning it. So that's kind of when the fun starts for me. When it's time to write that first line, and that you've got enough story in your head to begin, it's a good feeling. That said, every story that I've ever written has changed and transmogrified and morphed and just absolutely exploded, away from and into, those initial outlines and stuff. So they really kind of, a novel has to take on a life of its own. And I think that just, scientifically, there's, so many hundreds of millions of decisions that you make in a long piece of fiction that I don't see any way anyone could possibly see them ahead of time. They have to happen now. And it's like fission. It's like, molecules that go this way and press each other and explode. And that's how the story gets written.
I think that's one of the real things that maybe people don't understand about the creative process in writing a novel, or even a short story, but particularly a novel, is the numerous and endless, it seems like, number of transformations that happen in the process that it entails. It is truly a from concept to publication, a massive, long process, of which, as you've noted a couple times, the first line, and I mentioned John D. MacDonald earlier, he was a big believer that you spend a lot of time, whatever it takes, to come up with a really great first line.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about that? How much thought do you put into that? When you say, well, when I got to sit down and write that first line, is that something where are you really trying to knock something out of the park with that first line? Or is it just to get the ball rolling for you? What does that mean for you?
Sometimes you're trying to hit it out of the park, and sometimes you just want a single. An opening line doesn't have to go out, at all. When I wrote my first published book, Laguna Heat, this is 30 something years ago, many years ago, 1980, I started that book. And I wrote it 5 times. I wrote it 4 times, and none of the drafts were any good. They were all crummy versions of writers that I liked. I had bad Hemingway, and I had bad Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I had bad Jim Harrison. And finally, when I sat down to write that 5th draft, I made a deal with myself that I was only going to write in my own voice. And I was going to finally try to put all my heroes to bed for a while so that I could work, And in doing that, I found myself with the blank page and the first sentence to work on. And it took me about a half a day to write that first sentence. It was Laguna Heat, first sentence. And I wrote it and tinkered with it and moved the commas around and moved that around, and then tried to splice it with a summing and change all the stuff, little stuff, goofed around with it. But finally, 3 or 4 hours after I started that, it finally just clinked like a lock opening. And I looked at it and I thought, no, that's a good first sentence. It's alluring. It sets the story in a physical place. It promises certain things, topics that will be dealt with, and it's a perfectly wonderful first sentence. And so, talking to myself, I said, use that for a first sentence, and then try to clone everything that follows in the book from that sentence and not fall back into trying to be one of your heroes. Make that sentence the tonic, note of the book if you can. And I did. And when I finished that book, it was I don't know, 450-page manuscript, 400, whatever it was. And I remember thinking, well, this may not be a particularly good book, but it is mine, and it's honestly my voice that's out there. I'm not trying to borrow anybody's talent to tell a story.
Well, and for the uninitiated, it did okay. I think it sold a whole lot of copies, and it got made into a movie. So
it did. Yeah,
you did all right.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, I did.
You've probably not been told that before, but yeah, it was okay. You did a good job. I've only got a couple more here. One of the things I'm always interested in is a sense of place, and it feels like in the last few decades we've seen more writers really using San Diego and that whole the San Diego region as a setting and really as a character in so many ways. And it's such a fabulous part of the world. And I think people think of it sometimes as just surfers and everybody's chill and mellow. And of course, guys like you give it that underbelly of that's so necessary for crime fiction and thrillers. Tell me a little bit about using your region in the way that you do, like say almost as a character, or maybe even really intentionally as a character to some extent. Tell me a little bit about San Diego and
sure. Like you. I'm a sucker for setting, for place. As a reader, I really crave a solid foundation in the where, in the what, when I'm reading. I want to know what town it is, or city, or beach, or it doesn't matter. I just want to know what it is, and so I like a good solid foundation like that. And I've, over my many years as a writer, I've come to really, I've always really enjoyed writing about where I am, basically. Orange County has been the setting for, I don't know, half my book, San Diego for the other half, and a few here and there that were set neither. But when I moved to San Diego, it wasn't that long ago. It was only 20 years ago. It was 2000, year 2000. And leaving Orange County and my comfort zone and where I grew up. I was born in LA and grew up in Orange County. I'd married in Orange County, buried loved ones in Orange County. And I moved down here with my new family, away from all that. And I think the thing that appealed to me first and foremost about San Diego is this little village of Fallbrook where I live now. It's 38,000 people. It's kind of loosely kind of a little on the rural side, kind of agricultural. There's lots of nurseries and orchards and citrus and gardening going on. And it's a quiet, peaceful place, and it's very, very Main Street. It's quiet and it's nice. And because it's Main Street, it's got a little bit of everything. There's not a lot of franchise action here. It's a lot of mom and pop stuff. We have a good racial mix. Indian people run the Indian restaurant, and Japanese people run the Japanese restaurants, and it's neat. It's really neat. It's kind of cosmopolitan in a real conservative, kind of cool way. And so I fell in love with Fallbrook, and I started setting books there. And the whole Roll and Ford series is set in Fallbrook. The larger San Diego, what appeals most about me to San Diego, one is the gigantic variety. I mean, it's a huge county to start with. From the shining sea to the scorching desert to the mountains. I mean, there's everything that you could want. Politically, it's all over the place. It's basically a conservative place, and I write about that a lot. And I also think that San Diego's proximity to the border to Mexico gives it a real front row ticket to what's going on internationally. That's a big deal, that border is, and what happens back and forth. Another thing about San Diego is it's a gigantic military town. Right next to Fallbrook, there's Camp Pendleton. It's one of the biggest Marines camps in the world, and so traipsing in and out of Pendleton on a daily basis are the soldiers prosecuting these wars in all corners of the earth. And I talk to them. I see them at the Arco station, and I ask them how it's going, and I ask them where they've been. And I had an entire novel given to me by one conversation with a young man at a gas station that I met, and took it from there. So I like the variety, and I like our area. I think it's kind of it's really varied, and it's really big without feeling congested or monolithic.
Well, note to anyone who just randomly runs into Jeff Parker at the gas station, you might end up in a book. Just remember that. We're on time here, so I like to end with what I intend to be a fun question. I hope is a fun question. Let's say I had the magic ability to put you together for maybe a drink and a conversation with any one of the following three people. Who would you choose and why? This is like the lightning round finish here. The people that I'm gonna offer you as your options are Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the famous writer, of course. William Mulholland, who might be one of the most responsible or people responsible for the modern Los Angeles basin, or the 1920s movie star Jean Harlow. I can put you together with any one of those three people. Who would you choose and why?
Let's see. I think I would probably choose Jean Harlow. Don't know much about her, besides she's beautiful and talented. And I would certainly enjoy a martini across the table from her. Mulholland, I wouldn't know what to ask him. I mean, great, engineer and visionary and all. Everybody's favorite bad guy when you watch Chinatown,
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not him, but it's kind of like him. And Doyle, yeah, I don't know, great writer, and I don't know what I'd ask, but I'd say Harlow, the time, especially, her time in history, I would like to know more about.
I'm actually right there with you. I mean, 1920s Hollywood would be fascinating to get the inside scoop on, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, thanks again. I really appreciate it. This has been a fascinating conversation. I knew it would be. You're not just a fabulous writer, you're an incredibly interesting person, and I appreciate you taking the time to share the insights with me and with folks who tune in on this every once in a while. For all of you who out there who might have joined us, thank you. Appreciate that. Keep watching. We're going to have more of these interviews coming up. I've got a whole lot of folks lined up. Jeff, once again, thank you. I will anxiously be watching for the new book. It really sounds interesting. Can't wait to see where you deviate off a little bit. I just want to see the stretch here. I think it's going to be great. So until next time, thanks for joining me, Rich Ehisen, and in this case, Jeff Parker on the open mic, and we will see you next time.